I want to start today with a question that might make you wince a little bit. It's a question about regret.
Okay.
What's the single biggest financial mistake you have ever made? Or, maybe to put a more positive spin on it, what's the biggest opportunity you just let slip through your fingers?
Wow, that is a painful place to start. I think we all have that story.
We do.
You know, the stock we didn't buy, or maybe the Bitcoin we sold for a pizza back in the day.
Exactly. We all have that one that got away.
Yeah.
But I can almost guarantee you, no matter how much you cringe thinking about it, it pales in comparison to the story we are unpacking today.
Oh, really?
We are talking about a mistake, a literal, documented transaction that cost exactly 98 pounds.
98 pounds? That sounds like a nice dinner for two in London. Maybe.
Right. But for that 98 pounds, a recording studio essentially handed over the master tapes and the entire future career of the Rolling Stones.
It's one of those stories that just sounds like an urban legend, doesn't it? Until you actually see the documentation.
And today, we are not just relying on rumors. We are diving into a first-hand account from Alan Florence, who was actually there. He was an engineer at the legendary IBC Studios during this whole thing.
Ah, okay, so this is from someone inside the room.
This is the deep dive, and we're looking at the 98 bill mistake. We're going to explore how one of the most prestigious studios in London had, well, the biggest band in the world in the palm of their hand.
Recorded fantastic demos.
It's just let it go.
And what's so fascinating here is that this isn't just a story about a bad business deal. It's really a snapshot of the music industry in the early 60s.
Yeah.
It's about that clash between the quote-unquote experts at the major labels and the people who are actually in the room making the music. It just raises these huge questions about how we value talent.
So let's set the scene. We have to talk about IBC Studios.
Yeah.
Because before we get to the Stones, you have to understand where this is all happening.
Right.
The source material mentions IBC stands for the International Broadcasting Company. This was not some guy's garage.
No, not at all. And to really get the vibe, you have to go back to 1930, when it was founded by a man named Leonard Plugg. And the context here is just so important. It was set up as a commercial rival to the BBC.
Which is a bold move in 1930. The BBC was, it was the monolith.
Incredibly bold. The BBC was state-run, very proper, very buttoned up. So IBC had to be sharper, faster, more commercial right from day one.
And the building itself sounds incredible. I love when the location sort of feels like a character in the story. Alan Florence describes it as this place built around 1800, a 4-level structure that used to be a grand old home.
And that history, really shapes the atmosphere. You have these 4 levels, and Florence notes a detail that I think is just so perfect. The basement was originally for servants.
Oh, I love that detail. That whole upstairs-downstairs dynamic is literally built into the architecture.
It really is. And by the time it's a recording studio, that layout dictates how the music gets made. You have Studio 1, which is this massive main room.
That would have been the grand reception rooms, probably.
Exactly, where you'd put the big orchestras.
And then tucked away on the 3rd floor, you have Studio 2.
A much smaller space. Florence says it was used for, voiceovers or a single piano. Very intimate.
So you have this collision of 19th century architecture and 20th century tech, wires running through old molding.
Yeah, microphones set up in ballrooms. But despite the age of the building, the output was just cutting edge. The list of people who recorded there is staggering.
I'm looking at the list right here from the source. The Beatles, David Bowie, Elton John, Jimi Hendrix.
It's literally the canon of modern music.
Who is literally on the list? Rod Stewart, The Kinks.
It's like the entire soundtrack of the 20th century is captured in this one building.
It really was.
And we shouldn't overlook the engineers either. Lawrence lists guys like Joe Meek, Keith Grant. These aren't just button pushers. These are the architects of the British sound.
Joe Meek alone is a legend for his production techniques.
Oh, absolutely. He used the studio as an instrument before anyone else really was.
Yeah.
So when the Rolling Stones walk in, they aren't walking into a vacuum. They're walking into this hub of immense talent and prestige.
Okay, so we have the setting, prestigious studio, incredible history. But here's where it gets really interesting. In late 1962, just after Alan Florence joins, everything changes.
Right. A management shakeup. The property gets sold to Eric Robinson and George Clouston.
And Eric Robinson, he isn't just a suit, right? He's a famous musical band leader.
Which is a really important distinction. The new owner is a creative. He gets musicians. And because of that, they come up with this new business strategy that honestly sounds way ahead of its time.
This is the spec deal.
Exactly. They hold a staff meeting and they basically say, look, when the studio isn't booked, it's just sitting here costing us money.
So they tell the engineers,
If you know any artists, local groups, bring them in.
we're free.
For free, no upfront cost. The idea was to use the downtime to record high-quality demos. Then IBC would send them off to the big labels, Decca, EMI, Philips.
It's basically a talent incubator.
It is. And the incentive was brilliant. If an artist got signed, the staff involved would get a piece of the action. It turned the technical staff into A&R guys.
Which brings us to the moment of destiny. One of the other engineers comes up to our source, Alan Florence, and asks for a favor. He says, I know a local group. Can you help me record them one evening?
And Florence's first reaction is just priceless.
Oh, it's classic. He asks the name of the band, and when he hears the Rolling Stones, he just says, that's a strange name.
It's funny, isn't it? The Rolling Stones sounds so monumental to us now, like Mount Rushmore. But back then, to a professional engineer, it probably just sounded a bit clunky.
But he agrees. He says, I'm free, I'll help. And just like that, the Rolling Stones are booked into IBC.
So let's look at that first session. This wasn't a quick in-and-out job. They were there for 5 hours, from 7 p.m. until midnight.
And they lay down 4 tracks. And according to Florence, these were not rough sketches. He calls them really fantastic R&B tracks.
And that's the key. Florence was in the room. He was listening to the sound pressure moving through the air, not looking at a marketing report. He says he was knocked out by the band.
He thought they were great. So he does his job. He edits the tape, cuts the acetates. For anyone listening, can you just explain what an acetate is?
Sure. An acetate is basically a reference disc. It looks like a record, but it's a metal disc coated in lacquer. It's a one-off copy you'd hand to a record exec so they could listen to it on their office turntable.
So they have these acetates, these physical proofs of the Stones' talent, and they get ready to ship them off.
And this is where the gatekeepers enter the story.
The majors.
The majors. They send these professional demos to Decca, EMI, Philips, all of them.
Yeah.
Unanimous rejection. Not interested.
It just blows my mind. Every single one of them passed.
Every one. And remember, these were recorded at IBC by pros who knew how to make records sound good. The labels heard the fidelity, they heard the performance, and they still said no.
Why, though? How could they all be so wrong?
Well, it's that classic problem, right? In 1963, the labels were looking for what was already working. They wanted clean-cut pop stars.
The next Cliff Richard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the Stones were gritty, they were bluesy, they were a bit dangerous. The executives couldn't map that sound onto their existing spreadsheets. They heard noise where the engineers heard energy.
But the studio didn't give up. I love this part. They didn't just say, oh, well, we tried.
No, they brought them back.
They scheduled a second session, another evening, 7 to midnight.
And they recorded 4 more tracks.
And Florence is even more excited about this second batch. He specifically mentions Mick Jagger, says he was fantastic and the band was superb.
So now they have 8 tracks. 8 studio-quality tracks of the Rolling Stones in their hungry years. That's basically an album.
Florence edits them all together onto one professional Nebby spool. They cut new acetates. They send them out to the same companies again.
Round 2.
And the result?
Still not interested.
It really shows the disconnect, doesn't it? You have the engineers, the people with their ears to the ground saying, this is superb.
And you have the executives in their offices saying, we don't hear a hit.
So now you have this incredible asset just sitting on a shelf at IBC, 8 tracks of pure gold. But to the business, it looks like wasted time. It looks like a liability.
And that leads us to the phone call.
The phone call that changes everything. So some weeks go by. Alan Florence is in Studio 1, working a session, when the studio manager, Alan Stagg, called him up.
And Stagg has a very administrative request. He isn't asking about the snare sound. He wants Florence to do the math.
He wants to know the damage.
Exactly. He asked Florence to calculate 3 things: the cost of the tape, the cost of the studio time, and the overtime pay for the 2 engineers.
Wait, overtime? I thought this was a free spec deal.
Well, the studio still wanted to account for the cost on their books. They needed to know what the operational cost was, including the labor value of their engineers.
So Florence sits down. He crunches the numbers for 2 nights of recording and editing. And the grand total comes to
98 pounds.
98 pounds.
I mean, you have to adjust for inflation, obviously. 98 pounds in 1963 is what, a couple of £1,000 today?
Even so,
Yeah.
for the master tapes of an album's worth of material, for the rights to the Rolling Stones, it's peanuts. It's an administrative fee.
So Florence takes this bill to the manager's office, and he asks the obvious question: why do you need this? Is something happening?
Yeah, he's probably thinking, maybe we finally got a bite. Maybe we're going to get that bonus.
But that wasn't it.
No. Stagg tells him there's a gentleman named Andrew Luke Holder.
Right, that's the name Florence uses in the source material.
And this gentleman had walked in with a very simple proposition. He wanted to take the group off their hands.
Off their hands. What a dismissive phrase, like they're old furniture you're trying to get rid of.
It implies the band was a burden, a problem to be solved. And Holder said he'd pay whatever the costs were.
So the bill was £98.
And he paid it. He handed over the cash.
And in exchange, IBC handed over the tapes.
And just like that, the Rolling Stones were gone.
I can just picture the handshake, the relief on the studio manager's face. He probably thought he was being a prudent manager, you know? Look, I didn't lose money on that weird band.
And meanwhile, Andrew Luke Holder is walking out the door with a winning lottery ticket.
And it didn't take long for the regret to set in.
No, it happened fast.
Florence notes that not very long after this, Decca, the same label that probably rejected the demos, put out the Stones' first single.
And boom, big hit.
Huge. Suddenly, the Rolling Stones aren't a local group anymore. They're a big name. They're global. The strange name is on everyone's lips.
And IBC is left standing there holding 98 pounds. They balanced the books, but they lost the fortune.
And the irony just gets deeper when you find out what happened to those specific recordings. You might think, well, maybe those were just demos.
Yeah, maybe they weren't the hits.
But Florence confirms that those 8 R&B tracks didn't just vanish. He says they were eventually released on one of the band's later albums. He thinks the 3rd or 4th one.
So these were the actual recordings that fans eventually bought and loved.
They were.
So let's just recap the math here. IBC pays for the overhead. Their engineers pour their hearts into recording these tracks. They recognize the talent. They do the work. And then they sell the finished product for cost price.
It's the ultimate failure to capture value. They did everything right except for the final part. They didn't hold.
So what does this tell us? Because usually when you hear these stories, it's because someone just said no, like Decca rejecting the Beatles. But here, IBC said yes.
That's the nuance, isn't it? IBC recognized the talent, but they failed to recognize the commercial viability on their own terms. They were waiting for external validation from the major label.
Ah, that's it. They're waiting for Decca or EMI to give them the thumbs up.
Exactly. The engineers in the room, they knew. They felt the energy. But the business side of the studio didn't trust that instinct enough to hold on to the asset. When the label said 0, the studio manager assumed the value was 0.
It's a classic case of looking for social proof instead of trusting the product right in front of you.
Precisely. So when a guy walks in offering 98 pounds, it actually feels like a profit. They thought they were mitigating a loss when they were actually selling a gold mine.
It makes you think about the engineers here. That incentive deal.
Oh, that's the heartbreaking part. They did the legwork. They found the band. They stayed up till midnight. If the studio had just held on a little longer, those engineers might have seen a life-changing payout.
Instead, it all went to Andrew Luke Holder. It just emphasizes how precarious success was back then. You needed the talent, the Stones had that. You needed the technical quality, IBC provided that.
But you also needed someone with the vision to see the future value and just hold on. And that's what Holder provided. He saw what the labels missed and what the studio was too risk-averse to keep.
It makes you wonder how many other tapes were sitting on shelves at IBC. Yeah. I mean, with that roster.
Bowie, The Who, The Kinks.
Yeah, were there other 98-pound transactions we just never heard about?
It's very likely. I mean, the spec deal model is high risk, high reward. For every Rolling Stones, there were probably 50 bands that went nowhere. The manager was probably thinking about those 50 bands when he made the deal.
Just clear the books, tidy up.
Exactly. But history doesn't remember the ones that cleared the books. It remembers the ones that got away.
It certainly does. And it really changes how you view expertise, doesn't it? The labels were the gatekeepers.
But they were consistently wrong. They rejected the acetates twice.
It's a good reminder that no isn't always the final answer. It's just the answer from that person at that time.
And sometimes the person with the best judgment is the one closest to the work. The engineer moving the faders knew more than the executive in the office.
Alan Florence knew. He was knocked out. Before we wrap up, I want to go back to that image of the building. The servants in the basement, the rock stars in the studio. In a way, the Stones were kind of treated like servants in this whole transaction.
Shuffled around, valued only for the cost of the tape.
Until they weren't. Until they became the masters of the house.
That is a perfect way to put it. It's a story of value transition. At 7 p.m., they're a strange name. By midnight, they're fantastic. A few weeks later, they're worth 98 pounds.
And a few months later, they're priceless.
And poor Alan Florence is left holding the receipt.
Yeah. He's left holding the story. And honestly, having a front row seat to history, that's a value of its own. He can listen to those records and say, I put that mic there.
That is true. Even if it doesn't pay the rent like a royalty check would, he's part of the legend now.
He is. So as we close out this deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought about those gatekeepers. The experts at the biggest companies in the world all agreed the Rolling Stones weren't worth signing. The only people who believed were the guys in the room.
It really raises the question, who are we listening to when we judge potential? Are we listening to the critics, the institutions?
Or are we listening to the sound itself? And maybe more importantly, do you have something of immense value sitting on your shelf that you're about to let go of for 98 pounds just to clear the clutter?
Don't sell the tapes just yet.
Keep your ears open. You never know when the next Rolling Stones might walk in with a strange name.